Have you ever walked away from a conversation, feeling like you were speaking from the heart, yet still ended up being misunderstood? You tried your best to express yourself honestly and kindly, but somehow, the other person felt hurt. Or maybe it was the other way around. Someone close to you said something simple, without meaning any harm, but for some reason, it still left a deep wound inside. They didn't mean to hurt you, but the pain was real. Words are invisible. They have no weight, no form, but they can strike like a storm or drift like a spring breeze. One sentence can lift a heart that's breaking. Another can silently cut through the heart, precise and unexpected. Words can hold a family together, or slowly pull them apart. They can repair what's broken, or break what's quietly healing. You might think, this has nothing to do with me. I'm not violent. I don't yell. I don't hit. But then, a quiet, startling truth begins to settle in. We're living in a world full of hidden harm, woven into our everyday language, in the way we criticize, judge, stay silent, blame. It doesn't leave bruises, but it cracks trust. It doesn't scream, but it creates distance. What hurts us isn't always the lack of love. Sometimes it's just that no one ever taught us how to express that love without hurting each other. And that's why this book matters. Nonviolent Communication by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg isn't just for the wounded. It's for all of us, those striving to love better, day by day, without hurting the people we never meant to hurt in the first place. This isn't just theory. It's a doorway, a path back to yourself, and to the ones you want to stay close to. Marshall Rosenberg, a clinical psychologist and founder of the Center for Nonviolent Communication, dedicated over 50 years to studying, practicing, and healing. He helped millions of people around the world rediscover understanding, compassion, and real connection in their everyday conversations. So, how do we speak our truth without hurting the ones we love? How do we listen without judgment? And how do we turn our words from weapons into bridges, from barriers into tools of love? Maybe it's a tense talk with your partner, a misunderstanding with your child, or a casual comment from a friend that hit harder than you thought it would. I've felt the weight of a misspoken word myself, have you? I've been there too, and we're here for you. We're listening. Let's step into this journey with my narrow mind. Grab this book, and if it touches something in you, share below. We're listening, and we're here for you. There was a time I had a disagreement with someone I love. No one raised their voice. No one walked away. But after that conversation, we didn't speak to each other for weeks. I still remember, I spoke from the heart. All I wanted was for them to understand how I was feeling. But instead of understanding, I remember that distant look in their eyes. And suddenly, a space appeared between two people who once felt so close. I've felt that distance too, have you? Have you ever been in that kind of situation? You said something you thought was honest and sincere, but the other person heard it as criticism. Your words were misunderstood, and they ended up hurt, even though you never meant to cause pain. Or maybe the opposite happened. Someone said something casual, but it stayed with you, quietly hurting for a long time, even though you knew they didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe it was a friend who said, "Why are you still upset about that?" And you felt completely unseen. Or your partner, without thinking, said, "You always make everything more complicated." You knew they didn't mean harm, but still, it hit harder than you thought. Maybe the distance between us and the people we love doesn't begin when we stop loving, but when we no longer know how to speak in ways that help each other feel loved. Dr. Marshall Rosenberg once asked a haunting question: when a mother yells at her child, does it really mean she no longer loves them? When couples fight, blame, and accuse, does it truly mean the love is gone? He believed the more we love, the more we expect. And when those expectations aren't met, we react with blame, comparisons, judgment, or silence. We think we're communicating, but in truth, we're hurting each other, using a language we were never taught how to use with kindness. And slowly, another truth reveals itself. Language can be a bridge between hearts, but it can also quietly weaken love with just a single sentence. We often say, the problem is our emotions, but maybe the real problem is how we express them. And because we don't know how, we end up hurting each other even when there's still love. Nonviolent communication, as Rosenberg reminds us, isn't just a technique. It's a way of living, a way of bringing love back into our everyday words. Maybe you weren't wrong. Maybe the love was always there, just waiting to be spoken differently. Let's keep walking this journey with Monera Mind. Let's find that way together. This is where nonviolent communication can guide us. Have you been there too? Share your story below. We're here to listen. Nonviolent communication, as Marshall Rosenberg described it, is not just a technique. It's a way of living, a mindset that helps us see others with empathy and meet them with an open heart. In every conversation, instead of reacting with judgment, anger, or blame, we learn to pause, to observe what's really happening, to connect with our true feelings, to recognize the unmet needs behind those feelings, and to express what we genuinely long for. Rosenberg called this the 4 steps of nonviolent communication: observation, feeling, need, request. The first step is learning to observe without evaluating. It sounds simple, but in practice, it rarely is. Most of the time, our observations come wrapped in labels and judgments. Imagine your team leader says, "I think your performance has been really poor lately." Pause for a moment. Is that a fact or an evaluation? When we're judged, we instinctively react. We defend, we shut down, we feel hurt, and real connection begins to fade. Judgments don't help us grow. They only tighten the tension. That's why, instead of saying, "You haven't been performing well," try saying, "I noticed you were more than 30 minutes late on 4 days last week." That's observation, clear, specific, free of blame or assumptions. When we describe what we actually saw, the other person is more likely to stay open and to share what's really going on inside. But observation without judgment isn't just for the workplace. It's a way of being, a daily practice that helps us clear our hearts of bias and assumptions. Have you ever been called irresponsible just because you missed an email deadline? When no one asked what you were dealing with in your life? Labeled lazy, when deep down you were just overwhelmed and didn't know where to start? Seen as difficult, just because you were setting healthy boundaries to protect yourself? When we label others, we stop seeing them. And when judgment enters, understanding quietly leaves. Have you ever been labeled unfairly? Are there labels from childhood you've carried for years, even though they don't reflect who you really are? Words like lazy, dramatic, irresponsible. Each one is a brick in the wall between us and them. Philosopher J. Krishnamurti once said, "Observing without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence." Rosenberg echoed this truth with poetry. "I've never met a lazy person. I've only seen someone lying down in the rain. But that doesn't make them lazy." Before labeling someone, ask yourself, is this who they are or just what they're doing right now? I've never met a bad child. I've only seen a child who doesn't yet understand. Before calling them rude, ask, are they misbehaving or just needing more guidance? And even in daily life, you might say your child is lazy with homework. But maybe they were just tired and needed a short break. So the first and most essential step in nonviolent communication is this. Practice pure observation. Describe what you actually saw. No labels, no stories, no assumptions. It might sound simple, but choosing to observe without judgment is an act of compassion toward others and toward yourself. But once we've learned to observe without judgment, what comes next? What do we do with the feelings that arise inside? Once we've learned to observe without judgment, without conclusions, the next vital step is this. Speak your true feelings. But why is this step so important in communication? Because if you can't express what's really happening inside of you, you'll never reach the true purpose of communication. And that purpose, according to nonviolent communication, isn't to change or convince others. It's to express ourselves honestly and to listen to each other in a space filled with peace and compassion. If someone can't express their emotions and needs clearly, they usually turn to the opposite. They lash out, or they shut down. They hold it in until it breaks out in ways they can't control. There's a powerful line in the book. Behind every instance of anger is an unmet need. To truly connect, we have to take one step deeper. We have to name what we feel. But why is that so hard? Because from a very young age, we were taught to hide our emotions. There were so many moments in childhood when our feelings were ignored or dismissed. When you fell and scraped your knee, someone probably said, "You're fine, it's no big deal." When you got bullied at school, maybe you were told, "Toughen up, don't let little things bother you." When you cried because something hurt deeply, someone might have said, "Don't be so sensitive." Somewhere along the way, we were taught this equation. Hiding feelings equals being mature, that expressing emotions was weakness, that crying was childish. But we were wrong. If you don't know how to care for and express your emotions, you're left with two choices. You suppress them too much and end up anxious, overwhelmed, or depressed. Or you explode suddenly and hurt those you love most. Expressing emotion is not a weakness. Bottling it up too long, that's what's truly dangerous. Marshall once spoke to a man who was visibly angry. He asked, "What are you feeling right now?" And the man replied, "I want to punch him. He disrespected me." But that's not a feeling. That's a judgment. Real emotions need to be named clearly and truthfully. I feel angry. I feel hurt. I feel anxious, lonely, or overwhelmed. Or I feel peaceful, cared for, calm. You can start practicing this. For example, instead of seeing a short, dry text from your partner and saying, "I'm just tired," try, when you reply with just "yes, I feel," brushed off. What I really want is to feel like you care, even a little. Or instead of watching your husband come home late multiple nights and snapping, do you even consider this your home anymore? Try, "You've been coming home so late lately. I've been feeling lonely, like I'm living here by myself." Or when your child doesn't finish homework, instead of scolding, "You're lazy," you pause and realize, are they tired, overwhelmed, unsure of where to start? Or when a coworker misses a deadline and you're tempted to say, "You're irresponsible," you stop and ask, what's going on for them right now beyond the surface? That's what nonviolent communication is about. Not hiding your feelings, not attacking others, but sharing what's alive in you in a way that invites connection. And what about you? When you're sad or disappointed, do you dare to say, "I feel hurt"? Or do you keep it hidden behind cold silence, just hoping they'll understand without needing to be told? Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't being misunderstood. It's not having the words to tell someone what's truly going on inside. After we've learned to name our true feelings, the next step is to go deeper. Where do those feelings come from? That's when we begin to explore our needs. But here's where many people get confused. We often think expressing a need means saying what we want, like, I need a vacation, or I need you to help me more. But in nonviolent communication, a need isn't just a demand or a preference. It's not about fixing the outside. It's about understanding the inside. A need is the root of your emotion. It's the deeper reason you feel what you feel. For example, imagine someone says to you, I'm really disappointed you didn't come to the party last night. To the listener, that might sound like blame. It feels more like a complaint than a connection. But now imagine they say instead, I felt disappointed when you didn't come last night, because I really wanted to talk to you about something that's been hard for me lately. That one small shift makes all the difference. Why? Because in the second version, the speaker isn't just pointing out your action, they're revealing a need, a longing for support or connection or to be heard. Can you feel the difference? The first version focuses on what you didn't do. The second focuses on what they truly needed and didn't get. And in that difference is the doorway to connection. Every time you feel something strong, try gently asking yourself, what is the unmet need behind this feeling? When you can say what you truly need, the other person doesn't feel blamed. They feel invited. They might even feel honored, realizing, wow, I actually matter to this person. And suddenly, the space between you starts to soften. Because at its core, nonviolent communication isn't about asking others to meet your demands. It's about giving them the chance to understand you more deeply. And sometimes, all it takes is a bit of courage to name what's really going on inside, and you might be surprised by how willing they are to truly listen. Now we arrive at the final step of nonviolent communication, making a clear request for what you truly want. Marshall Rosenberg called this a request for support, a way of expressing desire, not giving orders, and not manipulating with guilt or emotion. Because when you shift your mindset and your language, the quality of your connection shifts too. Many people struggle to tell the difference between a request and a demand. Here's one simple way to know. If you get upset, blame, or criticize someone for not saying yes, what you made wasn't a request. It was an unspoken demand wrapped in emotion. Or if you try to trigger guilt to make the other person feel bad so they'll agree, then it's not a request anymore. That's emotional pressure, not a true invitation to connect. Let's look at an example. Someone says to their partner, I feel so lonely going alone. Can you come with me? On the surface, that sounds like a request. But if the partner says no, and the response is hurt, anger, or silent resentment, then the request wasn't really a request. It was an unspoken demand, wrapped in emotion. Another version of the same message might be, if you really cared, you'd come with me. We've all heard lines like this. They sound familiar, maybe even normal. But in truth, this kind of statement uses emotional obligation to force a response. It's still a demand, disguised as vulnerability. And yes, these kinds of messages might work in the short term, but over time, they erode trust and weaken emotional safety in the relationship. Some people are afraid to ask for what they need at all. They speak vaguely, drop hints, or wait for others to guess. And when the other person doesn't pick up on it, they feel hurt. They say things like, they just don't understand me. Maybe they don't really love me. Let's take another example. A wife says to her husband, I don't like that you keep working overtime like this. The husband hears that, and the next week, he stops staying late at work. But instead, he signs up for evening golf lessons. Now the wife feels frustrated. Why? Because what she really wanted was more time together as a family. Here's the truth. Not everyone can read between the lines, especially when they themselves have never been taught how to express their own needs. So, how do we make a request that's clear and kind? That's where we return to the 4 steps of nonviolent communication. 1. Observe the situation clearly, without judgment. 2. Express your real feeling. 3. Name the need behind the feeling. 4. Make a clear, actionable request. Here's a real-world example. You gave your colleague an important folder to keep safe. The next day, you see it sitting out on the desk. You feel frustrated. Instead of snapping or scolding, try saying this. Step 1. Observation. I saw the document from yesterday was left on the desk. Step 2. Feeling. I felt a little disappointed. Step 3. Need. Because I had asked you to keep it safe, and I'm worried that if it gets lost, it could really impact our project. Step 4. Request. Would you be open to putting it in the drawer and locking it up next time? This way of speaking doesn't accuse. It doesn't shame. It simply communicates with honesty and respect. And that's why the other person will be more open, more likely to hear you, and take action. The truth is, nonviolent communication is not just about how we speak to others, but how we check in with ourselves. It invites us to pause, to look closely at our thoughts and our words. Because sometimes, the things we say casually, the little comments, the emotional reactions, can hurt deeper than we ever intended. And at the heart of it all lies something simple but powerful. The courage to name what you truly need, the willingness to hear what others are really asking for. Only then can we begin to create a different kind of communication. One without resentment, one without emotional pressure, a space of real connection where love can stay, even in the face of our deepest differences. By now, we've begun to understand why words, even though invisible, can heal or wound. We've seen how nonviolent communication brings forth listening, honesty, and empathy in every conversation. And everything you've felt so far is only the beginning, because behind every unspoken pain lies a whole world of emotions, longing to be seen, heard, and understood. In the next part, you'll discover the practical steps of nonviolent communication, not just to speak more clearly, but to truly connect heart to heart. Don't miss part 2, where the real healing journey begins.